Capital Endowment Fund. So, welcome Sam. Okay, so we have 4 organisations that have applications in for the Capital Endowment Fund. And any questions for Sam, I guess? Sam.
Hey, thanks very much, Sam. The Riccarton Sports Hub, can I just ask, because I look at how we do it in some of the other sports clubs, how come that wasn't, or were they given the option of it being a loan, or did we talk to them about potentially loaning the money as opposed to granting them the money?
When Ange Leatherby joins us, she'll be able to speak more specifically to that application, but I don't believe there was a conversation about a community loan,
Right.
Because they meet the eligibility of the capital endowment. She's on her way, but because they meet the eligibility criteria for the capital endowment fund, it went to that. So I guess with a lot of applications, there's always that consideration, loan or grant, and these guys came in as a grant. Just to speak to the report, if I may, while people ponder other questions. I guess there's a couple of things I wanted to highlight. One was just a reminder of the criteria that Council established, which of course could be changed in the future, but this is the criteria we were working to, and this is for the fund is for community organisations who are doing projects that are one-off, that have a long-term benefit, that will see no additional further costs to Council, either in terms of the initial setup or ongoing. Projects that are at least of scale of over $50,000 and things that are new, so not projects that are halfway through and run out of funds, so it's for new initiatives. I guess keen to also just highlight section 4 of the report, which talks about the alternative option, just to save this money and make it as a rates reduction as an option for Council to consider. It's not the staff recommendation, as we've considered Council's intention through COVID to increase community funding at a time like this. Additionally, the fund was set aside during that long-term plan and not used as savings, and we've therefore were able to invite groups to apply. I guess I wanted to highlight that as an option. Additionally, I'm keen, these are all projects that we feel are community groups that we are partnering with as a council, as staff, towards things that meet the priorities of Council. And I guess to highlight that, I'm keen to welcome Community Development Advisor Stacey to speak to one of these.
Okay. Ko ora ki tukumanga, ko arahua tuka awa, ko takatumi tuka waka, ko nai tahu tuka iwi, ko Ngāti Wawai tuka hapu, ko taru tuka rai, ko Stacey tuka winga. Kia ora, good morning. My name is Stacey and I have worked for Council for a long time. And most of that has been with and for young people, but currently I'm, as Sam said, the Community Development Advisor for Papanui Innes. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. It is my honour and privilege to talk to the Tōra Hau application. It's something that I'm passionate about, just with my background with working with young people and being Māori. Being Māori in Christchurch is unique, I'll say. I grew up in the 80s, where there was a negative in our city, racist, I will say, anti-skinhead, so it's interesting. And a lot of Māori people came to Christchurch in the 40s and 60s through the trade training schemes. So that's where young Māori men and women left their hometowns and travelled to Christchurch to make a new home. And in doing that, in those times, they lost their connections. Some, not all, lost their connections to their whenua, to where they're from. So I started today on purpose with my mihi, because that's my connection to my land, to my people, my whakapapa, to my tūpuna. And so that's telling the story. I'm lucky because I've had people in my life tell me who guided me through that. And some of our young people don't. So some of our young people have lost that. And that's where Tōra Hau comes in, because I know, as Councillor Cotter, Davidson, McDonald, Goff and Kieran will know, Tōra Hau is a hidden gem in Papanui. They work with young Māori and Pacific people across the city. They get young people, they know young people. Their whakawhanaungatanga, their manaaki, their aroha for young people is life changing. As a youth worker, you don't do it for the money. You do it to make a difference. And when you see that spark and see a young person make a change, it's just kind of like yourselves. You do this job to make a difference for the people. To be part of that small part of that journey is amazing. What else can I tell you about Tō Hau? I'm not sure how many of you guys have spent time on marae. Once you get through the scary pōwhiri and the whakakoro and all of that, just actually being on marae is amazing. You just, if you sit in the wharenui or on the mattresses in the kitchen, hearing the stories, and you just learn so much. It's it's good for your spirit, your wairua. It is enlightening, it is powerful, it's magic. If you have any opportunity to spend more than half an hour on a marae, I would, because that's where the magic happens. That's where you learn about tikanga, you learn about Māori, you learn about the history. So for Tō Hau to have that opportunity to build a whare for the young people of our city would be amazing. This project is about young rangatahi base, so they've been involved in the concept design. So having a whare that is purposely built for young people is different, because obviously in our tikanga is our kaumātua and you look to your elders, but this is kind of a game changer, I think. So any investment council could do today to this organisation they could push go, they could start this process, and it's probably an investment to young people that probably our city might not see. So it's saying to them, we see you, we hear you, we've got you. So nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Happy to answer any questions.
Kia ora, thank you for that, Stacey. Any questions on the Te Aotearoa application? Sam?
Yeah, just one. Thank you very much for that, Stacey. And it's great you mentioned the funding that community boards do give. I must admit, at the time I did oppose it, but I've kind of seen the light in some respects.
Wow.
I see kind of. Yeah. Hey, look, just in terms of the recommendation that's there for that one. So it says make a grant of 150k, obviously for the building of its whare, and it's to be released in one instalment and reported on 12 monthly. But when you go to the matrix, it talks about the total project cost being $959. DIA have given 130, and the rest would be, potentially a fundraising campaign or bank lending. So, should we have more conditions around this so we can get comfort that the project will go ahead if we were to do it? I'm just trying to understand how we've got to that point.
Sure, well spotted, and we do look at this quite carefully when we're putting these resolutions together. And as Stacey said, the grant from us will allow them to make start. And one of the reasons for that is they do have an option to take bank lending. Obviously, the less they lend, the better. The grant does definitely make a difference, but it's not one where they need to make further fundraising to be able to let go.
So we don't need any further conditions on that?
Because it's to use the government language, shovel-ready project, we didn't think so, but obviously...
Right, okay.
Take your guide.
Okay.
Any further questions on that one?
Yeah.
James?
Kia ora, Stacey, mō tō mihi and kōrero. Hea ha te ingoa o te kaihautu. Who's running the project for you?
It'll be Tō Hau themselves. So John O'Campbell is the long-term kind of manager there and has a really good stake in Papanui. And I've got a project manager who is actually our deputy chair, Simon Britton, is also a member of Tō Hau. So I have 100% confidence that they'll be able to do this and do this.
Ka pai tō mahi.
Kia ora. Any other questions on that one? No, thank you. Which would you like to deal with next, Sam?
Don't mind. Maybe the one that Carla's here for.
Okay.
And I'll highlight there's a there's an error in the matrix. Our recommendation is for 40,000, but the top of the matrix says 100,000. I apologise for that error. The recommendation is 40,000. But questions can be answered by Carla Gumby.
Okay, any questions? Okay, any questions on any of those four now? Jimmy?
Only one question, because these four applications, I just want to know what's the sequence of the grant funding. For instance, like application 1, and we grant funding first, then your funding requirements are not met until the June 30, 2022, then funding will be withdrawn. But regarding application 4, before we grant funding 70K, but we need to confirm this sports club, waiting for receiving approval from the community board for the lease, lighting, and the tree removal. So I just don't know what kind of sequence of grant funding.
Sure, that's a good question, Councillor Chen. So when we put these resolutions together, it's bespoke per application based on its stage, and Capital Endowment Fund will only wants to fund things that are going to go ahead and succeed.
Yes.
Some are ready to go, so they don't need those conditions. With the city mission, we've made it conditional on the further fundraising they still need to achieve.
Yes.
And for a project of that scale, sometimes council funding can act as a leverage for those groups to be more successful with further applications to government funds, to other grant applications such as RATA. They will sometimes take council's lead on it. So it's appropriate to make the decision now to say go ahead, but then to release the funds at a later stage. And perhaps Ange can speak to the conditions that have been put on the resolution for the Riccarton Sports Hub.
Just see.
Thanks, Sam. So the Riccarton Sports Hub, it's quite an intricate space, and there's a number of leases already on the park. So what we would be looking to do is to relinquish some of the leases and then apply for a new lease which would cover the building for all of the three groups. And without having that certainty,
Yes.
the project can't proceed obviously without that.
Okay, thank you.
James and then Sam.
Thanks. Three questions. I'll just sort of say them because they is one because they kind of dovetail in and answer it how you want. But is the Capital Endowment Fund the most appropriate place for these applications? 2, are there other areas of funding where these applications could or would be eligible? And I guess finally, if the council were of a mind to decline the grants and return the Capital Endowment Fund sum to, say, the general rate pool, what avenues would these organisations have to explore for their funding requirements?
Sure. In terms of council funding, I don't see any other community funding pools that these would be eligible to, particularly for this level of scale.
And not the community loan scheme as well.
So yeah, I mean the eligibility for community loan scheme is quite broad, and it's conditional on being able to repay. So that would be an option for all of these. However, there's a couple that are going in for other lending. So to get a grant would make a big difference. And I think John's got something he wants to add.
With your leave, Sam, James, quite often loans are appropriate. Loans are not automatically appropriate in our view on these cases because a number of stakeholders are contributing different amounts and different values to the projects. A grant is needed, in our opinion, if the council wants to go down there for these, as it provides either seed funding or a quantum of equity in the projects to ensure their sustainability. For example, Carla's project, we could have offered less of a grant and the partner take out more of a mortgage, if you like. We decided to recommend slightly more, so the partner has more equity in their project to apply to be self-sustaining afterwards when they want to expand. So that's primarily the rationale for grant and the amount. Broad brush, our advisors can speak to more detail.
Does that answer the questions as a
Yeah,
the three
it does.
altogether? Great, thank you. Sam, then Anne.
Yeah, thank you. The other one is, so 5.3, the balance of the Capital Endowment Fund is 419. If the staff recommendations are adopted, it would be left 4,000 into next year's fund. So am I right in thinking that fund, that's not calendar year, that's financial year, isn't it?
Yeah, that is financial year.
So this will basically use that fund up until the end of June next year.
End of June. This is... Oh, yeah, next year, sorry.
So another 6 months.
So, originally when you looked at setting up this new way of doing community applications to the community loan scheme, you had a round 1 and a round 2. And that was to be done in August and February. However, because the annual plan was delayed, we wouldn't know how much fund was available, so we've delayed this until now. And there's no other pending applications to this fund at the moment. And with the reduced amount, so this time last year when we were having our round 1 funding, we had about 1.6 million available in the fund, which is significantly reduced now. These are 4 strong projects in the staff's view to fund. So we don't see there being a benefit in holding back on waiting for a round 2.
Cool.
Anne. Yep.
Yeah, kia ora. Hi, Ange. Just looking at the model that for the sports hub here, it looks really similar to what's happening out at Ngā Wai. Would you describe it in that way?
Yes, it is, insofar as the commitment from the partners. I think Ngā Wai is slightly different in that it's a regional sports organisation. This is very much club-based. But the commitment from the 3 partners to form an umbrella organisation and have all of the assets held under that organisation as opposed to one or more of the individual clubs is probably the best example of a club sports hub, I believe, in the city.
That's great. And would you expect to see really efficient use of resource in terms of people and money because of this model?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of these sports have got within their clubs a whole lot of resource from planning, architects, lawyers, and so we haven't actually put in a figure on what the clubs have committed to the project in their in-kind contribution, but it's quite significant.
And going forward, you'd see that it would save money in the long run because they're working together.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Right, Andrew, then Yanni.
Thank you. I am keen to drill down into paragraph 4, alternative option considered, not to allocate the remaining balance to community projects, rather retain funds to offset rates. And if we go back to the decisions that were made in the 2018 LTP, which was not to inflation-proof the Capital Endowment Fund as we normally would, but rather to increase the amount available for community projects or for the reasons that we use the Capital Endowment Fund. And we can really say that decision was reconfirmed in the annual plan decision-making in July of this year, so only a few months ago. There's never been any discussion about using any part of the Capital Endowment Fund to reduce rates. I'm just interested in why you would have considered such an option when that's not within the normal policy for the Capital Endowment Fund. It's not within the reason that we decided to go out of that inflation-proofing policy. I would have thought if you were going to consider doing anything other than using the funds for the designated purpose, it would be to return them to the Capital Endowment Fund so that the inflation-proofing was more protected, rather than using the Capital Endowment Fund to reduce rates, which has never been considered, and I wouldn't imagine we would be considering doing that.
Yeah, Andrew, the origin of that consideration was an organisational instruction to look at and consider every opportunity to relieve financial pressure on the organisation. So we thought that in good faith and acting on that instruction that came from council, we'd look at every opportunity. So perhaps the option was more not to allocate the Capital Endowment Fund, and in retrospect, perhaps that use the proceeds to reduce rates might have been going a little too far. But the object of that was to look at every possible way to save, and one option to council is to say, actually, we won't adopt it. So possibly pointing to an end point of reducing rates was a step too far. The principal reason behind the option was to not allocate and save. So that's the rationale behind the option. It's not the recommended option, principally for the reason that you've outlined, but we felt it would be irresponsible not to discuss the fact that we had considered it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yanni?
Have all the previous grants that we've paid out been fully allocated? Like, I'm just mindful of things like the bridge project in South New Brighton, which, you know, and there may be others where we thought things were going to happen and they may be a bit slower, or in some cases they don't eventuate. Is there any, how are we tracking the grants that we've paid out and what's happening in regards to progress?
Sure. So we do track the grants that are paid out. In fact, there's some grants that have been allocated and decided by council, but that haven't been paid out because they're still requiring those conditions to be met. A good example of that is the Scape sculpture at the end of the new northern motorway. So they haven't raised additional funds yet, and the resolution had them till June 2021 to do that. If they don't, then that 100k would default come back into the capital endowment for reallocation.
Sorry, I'm interested at a governance level, how we have oversight of what's happening with the funds that we've expended. Is that through finance and performance, or?
Yanni, we will be providing a full report to this committee in February on all of our funding schemes, the quantum, how far we have achieved goals, and give the committee the opportunity to plot a course, our governance course into the future, and we'd certainly be covering this sort of thing. So we'll be giving you an accurate picture.
Is that the funding review?
It's the funding review. It's it's the progress on funding. It's how it's been implemented, the balance of our funds, an opportunity for the committee to discuss at a governance level how we're going.
Okay, can I just get, like, rather than get bogged down, can we just get like a memo sent round it through the grants that we've made from the endowment fund and the ones that still haven't been allocated?
Just a quick status update.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. And I'll raise offline around that funding review. As chair of the funding committee, it might be quite nice to know what's planned. Cheers.
Okay, any last questions here? No? Okay, so I've got, I had Mike and Jimmy, so, sorry Mel, early in. So I've got Mike moving, Jimmy seconding. Any discussion? Melanie?
Yeah, I'm happy to support all of these. As Chair of Housing First, I'm particularly happy about supporting the city mission with the transitional housing for people who are homeless. I think it's really important and something the city needs. So I ask everyone to support as well.
Thank you. Anne?
Yes, just that, you know, this is about we only give this money when we've got evidence that this project demonstrates a benefit for the city of Christchurch or its citizens, or for a community of people living in Christchurch. And obviously, all of these do that, so very much in support of this funding.
Anyone else? Jimmy?
Hopefully, I support this full application because they all contribute in the compliance with the council's committee outcome. So we show the support. Yeah, thank you.
Jamie?
Here you go. I find this very difficult because I know how good these organisations are, and I know how fantastic these projects are too. In fact, I felt really good when reading the summaries in what was an excellent report. So you've got 4 outstanding projects and 4 outstanding organisations, and it doesn't really matter whether it's core council business or not. That argument, I don't think, is the clincher. But I think here are 2 facts. You don't have to look far to find an outstanding project or an outstanding organisation that isn't on this list in this city. That's never ending, and there are a lot of people doing fantastic things. We had our Community Services Awards last night, which is a reminder of that. And the second fact is that our finances are not in a good space at all. Our debt levels are sky high, and we're tracking to have an even higher projected rates increase than what we've even planned for, unless we do something differently. So as difficult as this is, we just need to start getting to a point where we're drawing a line in the sand. The policy does allow for this. These great projects and great organisations are eligible. However, this decision was made in 2018. The world has changed substantially since then. Our finances are worse since then. Our debt levels are worse since then. Our rate rises are projected to be higher since then because COVID-19 has happened. So I'm going to vote against this because, one, I'd like to see the Capital Endowment Fund inflation-proofed again, because we've been tracking backwards without doing that. That's the long and short of it. And I would actually like to see the remainder of it returned to the general rate fund, because, look, charity needs to start at home, and it's fun and it's easy to hand money out, but we need to draw a line in the sand. And I think we need to get our own house in order first before we can start looking that much further. We've also increased, may I say, another $500,000, $500,000 into the Strengthening Communities Fund. So we are doing, it's not an either or and it's not an all or nothing. We are doing a lot for the city, but we need to start making some cutbacks, because right now we're heading down the gurgler, and unless we do something differently, we're on a really scary course. So I'll vote against these, as much as I don't enjoy doing that.
Thank you. Pauline?
Yes, I wasn't going to speak, but I just feel I need to respond to perhaps a counter-argument to James Goff, because I feel that I don't think we're on a slippery slope to nowhere, actually. I think we're being really fiscally prudent this year. We're working very hard to strike an LTP budget, and I think we will get there. But we must never lose sight of the importance of our community organisations and the importance of walking alongside these groups, because that will make everything we do cheaper, stronger, more efficient, and far more beneficial to our city than anything else. And I particularly want to thank Stacey for her words this morning, which really hit home about the power of these groups and the benefit that they do. So I really urge you to support these groups, support this funding, because actually it's a fiscally prudent thing to do.
Thank you. Andrew?
Thank you. I think we need to bear in mind how we've got to the point that we're at with this paper that's in front of us today. In the 2018 LTP, we made some policy decisions around the use of the Capital Endowment Fund to support various activities in the city, actually to use the fund for its intended purpose. And we made a decision at that time to reduce the inflation proofing of the fund so that we could get more money out into our communities for that intended purpose. We essentially reconfirmed that decision in the annual plan in July of this year, which was only a few months ago, with exactly the same people sitting around the table at that time as are sitting around the table today. If we wanted to change that policy, using 4 applications that are in front of us today as a scapegoat to do so is not the correct way to do that. It would be something we would do in the long-term plan through proper, well-supported decision-making, and I imagine the implication would be far better dealt with. The implication would be far greater than the relatively small quantum that's in front of us today. Now, I've never heard any discussion around this table or any recommendation from staff around using the Capital Endowment Fund for a different purpose than it was originally established, namely to reduce rates. And I would have expected, if we were going to have that discussion, people would have raised it as part of the natural financial planning and strategic discussion we would have in the annual plan, rather than in response to 4 applications put forward by community groups who have put significant energy and effort into making those applications. So if people want to have those conversations, let's have them, but let's not have them in response to applications quite correctly coming forward in front of us for the purpose for which we established the fund and the purpose for which we want it to be used. Let's have those discussions properly and appropriately as part of the LTP. And let's not waste community groups' time getting them to apply for funds where we're going to make strategic decisions on the hoof when we should be doing that properly, if indeed there's an appetite to do so.
Thank you, Andrew. Sam, then Tim.
Yeah, thank you. And look, I agree with James Goff. This kind of stuff is never easy to say no to, but I think at some point we need to have an honest conversation as a city about where we are financially. And I was surprised to hear the Chair of Finance say that that shouldn't offset rates, but fundamentally, from an economic point of view, this money isn't sitting in cash bags out the back. We have to go and borrow this. So I think we're kidding ourselves if we think this doesn't have a financial implication for the city. So look, I agree. In a perfect world, I would love to grant all of these, absolutely no doubt. But when you have a government pouring out billions of dollars into an economy post-COVID, some of these should be there. Quite frankly, I look at the Riccarton Domain development. What a wonderful project and a real asset for the community. But you look at other sporting facilities that we support, and we do that by way of a loan. So I just think, we need to look at the way we do this. But I think we would be disingenuous if we said this doesn't have a rating impact. So unfortunately, I can't support it today either.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank staff for putting up the options that have been discussed by councillors and around this table a number of times. So I'm really sorry that there's been a bit of a go at you with presenting that. So I think it was only fair. There has been discussion around this table around and around and around. So I think it was quite right that you brought it and to air it. But so thank you. And it is a shame, and I do apologise. It just seems that he had a bit of a go at you, so I think that's wrong. I will support these, but what my concern is, and it has been for some time, is the comment with regards to wanting to support and walk alongside these organisations, which I think we should do as a council. Sometimes, though, my frustration is that we are walking along beside them on our own, and I think there are government agencies and major corporations that could be connected with these, and I'm just I know you guys are working hard with various organisations. The criteria has been set for this by this table, so don't forget that. So the criteria which these guys work to, we agreed to, and we in part set. So, we've got to remember that too. But I do feel, and my frustration is, that at times there must be organisations that say, oh, that'll be right, the council will do that, they'll pick it up. And that's my frustration. And so my only comment is that I would like to try and see us working harder with these organisations. I know you do, but yeah, that's my frustration. But thank you very much for the work you do.
Thanks for that. Barney?
I think we just need to be really clear. This is not rates money. This is from an endowment fund that was especially set up for this purpose. After extensive community consultation, this money is, as I understand it, not borrowed. It's in an endowment fund. So we borrow against it as a council. I understand that, but the money in the fund that we give out isn't money that's borrowed. It's actually an endowment fund that was set up for this purpose. So, but I just want to pick on a point that Councillor Scandrick made, because one observation is that actually it's much more than just groups having the ability to access funding. It is also about getting help with some professional services around things like project management or decision making around these projects. And I think when we look forward, one of the key things we need to do is ensure that we can provide support to these groups as they go through some of these processes. Some groups don't need it, but other groups, if they don't get it, tend to end up in a difficult situation, as we've seen with groups coming back around things like the community loans. So I do think we need to look at some consistency. I'm happy to do that through the funding review. I think that's the ideal time to look at that. I also would hope that we do have an ability to meet with our philanthropic partners in the city, like the Rata Foundation. I don't remember the last time we've actually met with them to talk through what their priorities are and to get a joint up approach to funding, because I know in the past some of these groups have struggled to access other philanthropic funding, and it would be really good to get a greater degree of synergy between what we're doing and what those groups are doing.
Thank you. Anyone further? No, Mike, would you like to wind up?
Just quickly, and I just wanted to thank Daisy for her words. They were very powerful, and it's been a privilege actually representing Papanui for the last 7 years, and getting to know the team at Te Oraho and some of the marvellous things they do there and how wide-ranging it is, and actually, you know, the cultural and social well-being that will be achieved from this whānau is going to be actually fantastic, and it does align 100% with where a council sits in the 21st century and what we're trying to achieve with our communities. Look, it's been disappointing, I guess, some of the comments that we've heard today around this fund. It has a very good purpose, and we're using it wisely. You know, I support all these recommendations in front of us. It's going to where it needs to go, and that's the community. And you know, sometimes action speaks louder than words, so it's easy to say things, but the reality is your vote is your action.
And with that, I'll put the vote. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any against?
No.
Would you like those recorded?
Yes, please.
Okay, so it's Sam and James and Catherine. Okay. Thank you very much. Declare that carried.